Lilian Dukudu, 25 years old, walked briskly through the marble lobby of Henderson Company, her heels tapping a rhythm only she could keep. The cool Lagos breeze barely made its way through the grand revolving doors of the high-rise on Victoria Island. Lilian was, as usual, early. For the past 2 years, she had been the personal assistant to Mr. Mario Henderson, one of Nigeria's most respected business moguls in logistics and supply chain management. He wasn't just a boss, he had been like a father figure, a steady presence in her otherwise unpredictable world. Her loyalty to him ran deeper than her job description. So when he'd called her into his office the previous Friday to announce his early retirement, her world had momentarily tilted. He'd said it gently, the way he always delivered hard news. "I'm stepping down, Lilian. It's time I spent more time with my grandchildren, and with myself." Her chest had tightened, but she had managed a nod and a professional smile. He'd done so much for her over the years. She couldn't be selfish. "But who'll take over?" she'd asked. He'd only smiled, rubbing his temple like it pained him. Lucas. The name struck her like a splash of ice water. Lucas Henderson, his only son, her first heartbreak, the one man she had never quite forgiven or forgotten. Now, as she approached her desk on the executive floor, her mind swirled with questions. Would she really have to work under Lucas? Did he even remember how badly he'd hurt her? They had grown up together. Their fathers, Jose Dukudu and Mario Henderson, had been best friends since their federal government college days. Weekend BBQs, New Year's celebrations, boat rides to Tarqua Bay. She and Lucas had been inseparable. At 17, they'd fallen in love. Young, reckless, and naive. Their love had been poetry written in sunshine and summer breeze. But at 19, everything had shattered. Lucas had drifted, cold texts, missed calls. Then one night, without explanation, he'd ended it. A week later, she heard from friends that he was obsessed with another girl, Rachel Adebayo. The painful twist? Rachel never even wanted him. Lucas chased a fantasy, and by the time he realized the truth, Lilian had already moved out of his world. Now, 5 years later, she was being forced back into his orbit. And he didn't even know. Lilian's phone buzzed, a message from the company's HR director. "Meeting in conference room A, 9 a.m. sharp, introduction of new CEO." She exhaled sharply and looked at the time, 8:58 a.m. Quickly gathering her notepad, she smoothed down the pleats of her emerald green midi dress and adjusted the delicate chain around her neck. She didn't want to look shaken, but her insides felt like jelly. As she entered conference room A, the entire executive team had already gathered. Soft murmurs of curiosity filled the air. Everyone was wondering who the new CEO would be. Then the doors opened again, and in walked Lucas Henderson, tall, clean-shaven, suited in charcoal gray. The sharpness of his jawline hadn't changed. Neither had his eyes, cold steel with hints of mischief buried deep. The room hushed into silence as he stepped to the head of the table. For a moment, his eyes swept the room, until they stopped on her. He blinked. Lilian didn't flinch. She met his gaze head-on. "Good morning," he began, his voice deeper, more mature. "For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lucas Henderson. I'll be stepping into the role of Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately." Polite applause filled the room, but Lilian's hands stayed still on her lap. Lucas didn't look at her again. Not once. After the meeting, she slipped out quietly, but HR caught her before she could escape. "You're being reassigned to work directly with Mr. Lucas Henderson starting today," they informed her, handing her a new desk assignment slip. Lilian stared at the paper. She didn't argue. She didn't scream. She just nodded. But inside, she burned. Lilian stood outside the sleek glass doors of the CEO's office on the 25th floor of Henderson Tower. Her palms slightly clammy. The brass nameplate had been replaced already. Lucas Henderson, Chief Executive Officer. It felt surreal. Just a few days ago, it had said Mario Henderson, a name that brought calm. Lucas's name brought something else entirely. Memories, tension, regret. She took a deep breath, knocked lightly, and heard the faint, "Come in." When she stepped inside, it was like walking into a different world. The office had been refurbished already. The warm wood tones her former boss had loved were gone, replaced with sharp black steel, glass, and minimalist decor. Cold, expensive, like Lucas himself. He sat behind the desk, fingers tapping rhythmically on the table. When he looked up, their eyes met. The air between them turned tight. "Lilian Dukudu," he said slowly, tasting her name as if trying to remember what it once meant to him. "Mr. Henderson," she replied with stiff professionalism. His brow twitched, just slightly at her choice of title. "I didn't know you were still working here. And I didn't know you'd be taking over," she replied, tone flat but respectful. Lucas leaned back in his chair, watching her closely. Funny how life throws people back together. Lilian didn't smile. "I'm here to do my job. If you want me replaced, I'll understand." He raised an eyebrow. "Do you want to leave?" Her silence stretched between them, like a stretched rope ready to snap. "No," she said finally, voice firmer than she expected. "I've worked too hard to earn my place here. I'm not leaving just because of history." Lucas gave a small nod, his expression unreadable. "Then let's get one thing clear, Lilian. This isn't personal. It's business. I won't treat you any differently than any other staff." "I wouldn't expect you to," she said coolly. Still, as she stood there, part of her wanted to yell at him, to throw the past in his face. But she didn't. Instead, she waited for instructions like the professional she had trained herself to be. Lucas pushed a leather folder toward her. "My calendar. I want every meeting confirmed, every gap optimized. I've got meetings with the board this week, and I want you to prep briefing notes for all 12 members." Lilian took the folder without flinching. "Noted. And one more thing," he added. "You'll be moving your desk back inside this office, just like you were for my father." Her breath caught. Sharing an office with Lucas? Being in his space all day? He saw the hesitation flicker across her face. "Is that going to be a problem?" "No, sir," she said tightly. "I'll have my things moved up by noon." "Good," he said. "That'll be all for now." Lilian turned and walked out, heels echoing on the polished floor. Once outside, she leaned against the wall for just a second, letting out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. This was going to be harder than she thought. Downstairs, the whispers had already started. "You heard? She used to date him. Back when they were teenagers, right? I heard she was heartbroken. And now he's her boss? Chai." Lilian walked past the stairs and the murmurs, chin high. She wouldn't give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her squirm. Not again. By midday, her things had been moved up to Lucas's office. A sleek, L-shaped desk was positioned to the side, near the window. It was technically her old desk, now in a new war zone. As she settled in, Lucas stayed focused on his screen. Not once did he speak. Not once did he acknowledge her presence. By late afternoon, she dropped a completed stack of briefings on his desk. He flipped through one, nodding. "Impressive, as usual." "Thank you," she said, fighting the flicker of warmth that tried to rise inside her. There was a pause. Then his voice softened slightly. "Do you hate me, Lilian?" The question blindsided her. She looked up slowly. "Does it matter?" He looked away first, fingers tightening around his Mont Blanc pen. "Maybe not, but I've wondered." Her lips parted, but the words she wanted to say tangled in her throat. Did she hate him? Or had she buried the heartbreak so deep it had only hardened into indifference? Lilian finally stood, brushing invisible lint from her blouse. "If you're done with me for today, I'll be preparing the materials for tomorrow's board session." Lucas looked up at her. "I'm not your enemy, Lilian." She stared at him for a long second. "No, you're just my boss." And with that, she walked out. But her hands were shaking. That evening, Lucas sat alone in the office long after the lights on the other floors had dimmed. He turned to the glass windows, watching the cars glitter along the Lekki Bridge. The city was alive, but inside him, something stirred uneasily. He had broken Lilian's heart once, foolishly, recklessly. And now he wasn't sure if he was being given a second chance or facing a reckoning. By the following morning, the corridors of Henderson Company buzzed with low chatter. Staff filtered through the building, heads close together, exchanging updates and gossip like coffee orders. The most popular topic? The new CEO and his assistant. "You mean Lucas Henderson and that Lilian girl used to date?" Someone whispered in the elevator. "Back in the day, it was serious, oh," another answered, "until he dumped her for one fine babe." "What was her name again?" "Rachel." That name still hung like a curse in Lilian Dukudu's mind. Inside the executive office, Lilian tried her best to ignore the glances she got whenever she entered or exited the glass-encased space. Her phone vibrated with a message from her friend, Ifeoma, who worked in legal downstairs. "Babe, people are running mad with Gisto. You okay?" Lilian didn't reply. She couldn't. Not while Lucas sat only a few feet away, discussing investment strategy with the CFO over speakerphone. She focused on reviewing presentation slides and compiling notes for an upcoming pitch to a South African investor. But Lucas's presence was unavoidable. His deep voice, his clean cologne, the way he occasionally glanced her way when he thought she wasn't looking. At 11:03 a.m., he ended his call and leaned back in his chair. "Lilian, how soon can you have those performance charts printed?" "Give me 20 minutes." He nodded. "Make it 15. I want to run through them before I meet Mr. Ioma." She stood and walked to the printer without a word. The silence between them had returned, tense, professional, pretending the past had never existed. But pretending could only go so far. That afternoon, Lucas stepped out for lunch with the director of marketing. Lilian used the free time to gather files for the next day's board strategy session. As she sorted paperwork on his desk, a voice startled her from behind. "Well, some things never change." "Oh," Lilian turned, and there she was. Rachel Etunde. Just as beautiful as ever. Maybe more so. She wore a tailored cinnamon brown blazer and matching trousers that screamed wealth and taste. Her braids were long, thick, and swept into a polished ponytail. Her smile, cold, calculated. "I'm sorry," Lilian said slowly. "Do I know you have a meeting scheduled?" Rachel's smile didn't waver. "Oh, darling, I don't need a meeting. I'm just visiting an old friend." Lilian arched a brow. "Lucas isn't in at the moment." Rachel looked her up and down, amused. "I see you've held on to this job. 2 years with his father, and now with him? Impressive. I'm good at what I do." "I'm sure that's what kept you around." Rachel's voice dipped slightly. "And not the hope of winning back something you lost." Lilian stiffened. "What exactly do you want?" Rachel moved closer, lowering her voice. "Let me give you a little tip. Assistant to the CEO. Lucas is smart, but men are predictable. They may flirt with memories, but they don't live in them. Don't confuse nostalgia for affection." Lilian felt heat rise in her chest, but she kept her tone even. "Thanks for the unsolicited advice, Miss Etunde. I'll be sure to file it under irrelevant." Rachel's laugh was rich and condescending. "Still feisty. That's cute." Just then the door opened. Lucas walked in, holding a smoothie in one hand and a manila folder in the other. He paused when he saw them. "Rachel?" he asked, clearly surprised. "Lucas." Her tone shifted into sugary familiarity. "I was just in the neighborhood. Thought I'd say hello." Lilian moved away from the desk and gave Lucas a pointed look. "I'll be in the conference room if you need anything." As she left, Lucas watched her go, his jaw tightening. Rachel noticed. "You two are still tense," she said with a smirk. Lucas looked at her. "What are you doing here, Rachel?" "Come on, Lucas, I was just being friendly." He chuckled dryly. "Friendly? You haven't reached out in 2 years. Not since you made it clear you didn't want anything serious." Rachel waved a hand. "That was then. People change." He folded his arms. "No, people reveal themselves. And you were very clear." Rachel tilted her head. "What? Regretting that you let her go?" Lucas stared at her, voice low. every single day. Lilian stood inside the conference room, gripping the edge of the table, trying to slow her breathing. She wasn't eavesdropping. Not exactly. The office walls were glass, and though she wasn't close enough to hear all their words, their body language said plenty. Rachel, leaning in too close. Lucas, folding his arms. Lilian had lived through this once before, watching herself lose someone to a woman who never truly wanted him. Only this time she wouldn't crumble. When Lucas walked into the conference room 20 minutes later, Lilian didn't even look up. "Rachel's gone," he said, trying to sound neutral. "I didn't ask," he exhaled. "She's not important." "You don't need to explain yourself to me, Mr. Henderson," Lilian replied, flipping through her binder. "Like you said, this is business." "Right," he murmured, "just business." But his voice lacked conviction. That night, Lilian sat alone on her small balcony in Ikoyi, overlooking the quiet shimmer of the lagoon. A cup of Zobo sat untouched in her hands. She kept hearing Rachel's voice. Not the exact words, but the tone, the arrogance. The way she had spoken like Lilian was disposable, like she was still that girl who'd once been tossed aside. But she wasn't. She had built herself into a woman who didn't beg for love, who showed up, who kept her head up even when her heart was heavy. And Lucas, he'd made his choices. She would make hers too. Whatever happened next, she wouldn't break again. The next few days passed with calculated silence. Lilian Dukudu was a model of composure. She kept to her side of the CEO's office, executed every task with efficiency, and maintained the calm grace she had honed over the last 5 years. But beneath her polished exterior, the edges were fraying. She couldn't stop thinking about Rachel, about Lucas's expression after she left, about the way he'd said, "She's not important." And yet, something had shifted. It started with the way he looked at her. Not as a subordinate, not as a forgotten chapter of his past, but as if he saw something he hadn't noticed before. Or maybe something he had deliberately ignored. On Wednesday, after their weekly executive review, Lucas turned to her as the board members filed out. "You've done well," he said quietly. "Today, this week." She looked up surprised. He didn't hand out praise lightly. "Thank you. I mean it, Lilian. I couldn't have handled this transition without you." She hesitated. "I thought you didn't want anything personal interfering with business." Lucas nodded, slowly. "I did say that, but maybe some things are unavoidable." Their eyes locked. For a moment, the room shrank, just the two of them, suspended in unspoken tension. It wasn't the same heat of their teenage romance. It was more grown up now, charged, uncertain, more dangerous. Lilian broke the silence first. "I'll email you the investor proposals by evening." He nodded. "Right, thank you." The moment passed, but the shift remained. That evening, Lucas found himself alone in his penthouse, standing barefoot on the marble floor of his open-plan living room in Banana Island. The lights of the city glittered far beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, but his mind was elsewhere. He poured himself a glass of red wine, then opened an old drawer and pulled out a photo. It was him and Lilian. Both of them were 17. The photo had been taken during a New Year's barbecue at Tarqua Bay. She was laughing, head thrown back, braids swinging. He had his arms wrapped around her waist. They looked happy, whole. Lucas sighed. How had he let that slip away? He remembered the allure of Rachel back then, her mystery, her elitism, her subtle manipulation. He'd been young and foolish, thinking desire meant destiny. Rachel had never loved him. She used his attention to toy with others, to climb social ladders, to watch girls like Lilian fall. And he'd let her. He had destroyed the one thing that had ever felt real. Now, sitting at the helm of a billionaire company, flanked by accolades and assets, Lucas Henderson couldn't shake the feeling that the most valuable thing he ever had was something he'd already lost. The next morning, Lilian arrived earlier than usual. She was in a navy blue pencil skirt, white silk blouse, and heels that made her legs look impossibly long. Her natural curls were pinned into a low bun, and her expression was unreadable as she walked in. Lucas noticed. "Morning," he said, eyes not leaving her. She barely glanced at him. "Morning, sir." "Sir." She was back to the formal wall. He wanted to break it, but how? At noon, a surprise delivery arrived at the reception. A large box, wrapped in black matte paper with a sleek gold ribbon. Inside was a vintage leather planner, embossed with her initials, and a note. "For the woman who keeps everything in order. L.H." She stared at the gift for a long time, expression unreadable. Then she tucked the note into her drawer without a word. Lucas pretended to be focused on his call, but he had seen the faint pink rise to her cheeks. Later that afternoon, the first real crack in the wall came, not from Lucas, but from the outside world. Lilian was walking back from the legal department when she heard two junior staff members whispering near the coffee machine. "She's only keeping that job because of her past with him. I heard they dated when they were teenagers. Maybe he's still soft on her." Lilian paused, her jaw tightening. She turned slowly and approached them. "If you have something to say about me, you can say it to my face." The two women flushed, stammering apologies, but Lilian didn't wait. She walked away, head high, but her heart pounding. When she returned to the office, Lucas was seated behind his desk, reading something on his tablet. He looked up as she entered. "What's wrong?" She hesitated. "Nothing." "Lilian." His voice was low but firm. "I'm fine," she repeated, sharper than she intended. He rose. "Talk to me, please." She laughed bitterly. "You want to talk now? After all these years? After what you did?" Lucas's eyes darkened. "I deserve that, but I'm trying." "Well, don't." Her voice cracked. "Because the whole office is already watching, judging. I worked hard to be seen as more than your ex-girlfriend. I rebuilt myself, Lucas, alone, without your help. I don't need your pity or your vintage planners." Lucas looked stunned for a beat. Then he stepped closer, voice lower. "It wasn't pity, Lilian." "Then what was it?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said softly, "It was regret." She blinked. "Regret for how I treated you," he continued. "Regret for not fighting harder. Regret for thinking I could ever replace you with someone like Rachel." The silence between them thickened. "I'm not asking for anything," Lucas added. "Just don't shut me out completely." Lilian stared at him, her throat tight. Then she turned and sat at her desk. And for the first time in weeks, she whispered, "Okay, it wasn't forgiveness, but it was something." By the time the next board meeting came around, Lucas Henderson and Lilian Dukudu had fallen into a new kind of rhythm, tense, respectful, but quieter. The emotional storm of their last exchange had given way to a strange calm. Not peace exactly, but a truce. And then came Mr. Ikena Fasasi's call. A major investor from South Africa was pulling out of a joint logistics expansion project. Henderson Company stood to lose over N2, $5 billion unless they secured another international partner, fast. The board was restless. Eyes turned to Lucas for answers. Lucas, in turn, turned to Lilian. "Call a meeting with the East Africa Consortium. I want to fly to Nairobi myself if necessary, but I'll need you with me," he said, handing her a list of key players. Lilian's brows lifted. "With you? You're the only one who understands the background fully, and I need someone I can trust." Her heart stuttered at that word. Trust. For a second, she wasn't sure if he was talking about work anymore. Still, she nodded. "Yes, sir." The Nairobi trip was scheduled for Friday, but what neither of them expected was what would happen at the Thursday pre-briefing dinner in Lagos. The evening was held at the Sky Garden restaurant in Victoria Island, a rooftop venue known for its floor-length chandeliers and panoramic views of the city skyline. Lucas had arranged the private dinner with key stakeholders, and Lilian had coordinated every detail, from the guest list down to the orchid centerpieces. She arrived 10 minutes early, dressed in a forest green sheath dress that fit like a whisper. Her hair was slicked back into a bun, and her lips were painted a soft plum. She looked breathtaking. Lucas nearly forgot to breathe when he saw her. "You look professional," he managed. Lilian arched a brow. "That was the goal, wasn't it?" A smirk tugged at his lips. "Unfortunately, you overshot the mark." As guests began to arrive, the mood shifted from formal to celebratory. Deals were discussed, toasts were made, but somewhere between the dessert and the final wine pour, Mr. Agata, one of the longtime board advisors, leaned in with a sly smile. "So, Lucas, we've all heard rumors." Lucas paused mid-sip. "Rumors? About your assistant?" Lilian froze. Mr. Agata chuckled. "I mean, when are you two making it official? The chemistry is enough to light up Banana Island." Laughter rippled around the table. Lucas didn't laugh. He looked at Lilian, then turned to the group. "With all due respect, I don't think my personal life should be the topic of discussion tonight." Agata shrugged. "Relax, it's just friendly banter. But if you ask me, a partnership in and out of the boardroom might just be your smartest merger yet." That drew more laughter. Lilian's face burned. She stood up politely. "If you'll excuse me, I'll go check on the transport arrangement." She left the table. Lucas didn't wait. He followed her out to the rooftop balcony, where the Lagos skyline blinked like 1,000 fireflies. She stood near the glass railing, arms folded. "That was humiliating. You didn't do anything wrong." "I'm tired of being your joke," she snapped. "First I was the girl you left behind. Now I'm the woman everyone thinks you're toying with." "I'm not toying with you." "Then what are you doing, Lucas?" His jaw flexed. "I don't know." Her laugh was bitter. "Well, that makes two of us." She turned to walk away, but he caught her hand. "Wait." His voice dropped to something raw. "I want to make this right. I want to protect you, Lilian. I want to fix what I broke. But I don't know how to do that when you're standing so far away." She blinked at him, startled. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he hesitated, "come with me to Nairobi, but not just as my assistant." Her heart stopped. "What does that mean?" He let go of her hand. "Let's start again. Just dinner. One dinner. No expectations, no rumors. Just you and me. Talking like two people who used to matter." Lilian's lips parted, but no words came. She turned back toward the city skyline, her mind spinning. After a long moment, she said quietly, "I'll think about it." Lucas smiled softly. "That's all I'm asking." The next day, they boarded the company jet to Nairobi. Lucas wore his usual charcoal suit and confidence. Lilian wore a navy blazer and matching trousers, but this time something in her posture had softened. She didn't avoid his gaze on the plane. She even laughed once when he spilled a bit of orange juice on his tablet. But it wasn't until they were settling into their hotel that the moment finally came. Lilian stepped off the elevator, Lucas walking beside her. "I thought about your offer," she said. Lucas looked at her. "And?" She paused at the door to her suite. "One dinner," she said. Lucas's smile was immediate but cautious. "Just dinner." She nodded. "Just dinner." But in both their hearts they knew. Dinner was only the beginning. The Nairobi night air was cooler than Lagos, softer somehow. From the rooftop restaurant of the Hilton Arcadia, the city glowed beneath a blanket of stars. Elegant lights cast a golden sheen over the terrace, and violins played gently in the background. Lilian Dukudu sat across from Lucas Henderson, every inch of her, poised but alert. She had chosen a burgundy satin dress with off-shoulder sleeves that caught the candlelight every time she moved. Lucas hadn't said anything about her appearance when he saw her, but the way he looked at her said more than words ever could. Their waiter placed 2 glasses of wine in front of them and disappeared. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lilian exhaled slowly. "So, we're here." Lucas gave a soft smile. "No board members, no Rachel, no gossip, just us." She nodded, swirling her wine. "We haven't done just us in a very long time." 6 years, he said. "Not that I've been counting." She glanced at him. "You remembered." He gave a low chuckle. "I remember everything." Lillian's heart gave an annoying little flutter that she tried to smother. She wouldn't be swayed by nostalgia. She needed clarity. So what is this really about, Lucas? Guilt? Regret? Trying to rewrite history? His face turned serious. It's about facing it, owning it, and maybe hoping for something better this time. She looked down at her wine glass, then back at him. You hurt me. I know. You broke me. I know that too. She paused, then added quietly, I had to piece myself back together without you. Lucas leaned forward. And you did. You became this brilliant, powerful woman who holds her head high, even when people whisper. You didn't just survive me. You outgrew me. Her eyes glistened, but she blinked it away. He reached across the table. Let me be worthy of the woman you've become. Lilian looked at his hand for a long moment. Then slowly she placed hers in his. Just dinner, she had said. But there, under the Nairobi sky, it became something more. The next morning, business resumed. Meetings with East African stakeholders went better than expected. Lilian took the lead on negotiations with the Tanzanian port partners, impressing everyone in the room with her command and poise. Lucas watched her in awe. She wasn't the girl he once dated. She was a force, and somehow she still had room in her heart for the boy who had broken her. On the flight back to Lagos, Lucas finally said what had been on his mind since dinner. Lilian, what if we tried again? Slowly, privately. Just a fresh beginning. She didn't look up from her tablet. You think it's that easy? No, he replied, but I think you're worth trying for. She closed the tablet and turned to him. You left me when it got hard the first time. Why should I believe you'll stay now? He swallowed. Because I've lost you once, and I won't survive it again. That silenced her. But she didn't say no. Back in Lagos, the office was abuzz with the news that the East Africa deal was salvaged. Lucas was hailed as a genius strategist. Lilian, too, received quiet praise from board members, impressed by her command. But the whispers returned just as quickly. She followed him to Nairobi. They shared a room, I bet. She's clearly working her way into his life again. Lilian kept her head down. She had no time for rumors. Until the gossip turned ugly. One afternoon as she left the break room, she overheard Maya, the HR junior associate, laughing with someone from PR. Of course she's back in his bed. That's how women like that survive. Seduce the right man, stay employed. Lilian didn't confront them. She just walked straight to her office, shut the door, and sat at her desk in silence. This was the cost. Loving a man in power meant being misunderstood, mislabeled, and misjudged. And Lucas, he wasn't just powerful. He was a Henderson. She couldn't go through this again, not without certainty. When Lucas returned to the office that evening, he found her packing up her things. His face tensed. Going somewhere? She looked up, expression calm but cool. I need to take a few days, clear my head. He stepped inside. Because of what people are saying? She nodded. Because I need to remember who I am when no one's watching. Lucas stepped forward. I don't care what they say. I care about you. I know, she said softly, but I also care about me. He wanted to stop her, to say more, but something in her eyes warned him to let her go. So he nodded. When you're ready, he said quietly, come back. She looked at him for a moment, then walked out, heels clicking against the floor, head held high. Lucas stood alone in the office, heart heavy. She was right to leave, but he could only hope. She'd also find a reason to return. It had been 4 days since Lilian Dukudu stepped out of Henderson Company, leaving behind her neatly organized desk, her routines, and, perhaps most difficult of all, Lucas Henderson. She hadn't answered his calls, hadn't replied to his emails. She'd needed the silence, the distance, and most of all, she needed to remember who she was without the gravitational pull of his presence. Now, seated in the quiet of her apartment in Lekki Phase, one sipping tea and staring out the window at the rain misting against the glass, Lilian wasn't sure if she'd succeeded in finding the clarity she needed or just created a new kind of confusion. Her mother had called earlier. "You're not a little girl anymore, Lilian," she'd said gently, "but you're also not a machine. You can't keep punishing yourself for feeling something deeply." "I'm not punishing myself," Lilian replied. Her mother had paused. "Then why does it sound like you're afraid?" Afraid? Maybe she was. Afraid that if she gave Lucas a second chance, she'd lose herself again. Afraid that if she didn't, she'd regret it for the rest of her life. Meanwhile, inside the CEO's office on the 25th floor of Henderson Tower, Lucas Henderson was losing focus. His team noticed. He sat through meetings without speaking, missed 2 briefings, left a pitch review halfway through, and disappeared into his office for hours. "Is everything all right, sir?" his interim assistant asked carefully. Lucas barely looked up. "Reschedule everything for today." Everything. When she left, Lucas walked to the window overlooking Echo Atlantic, the rain streaking the glass like tears. He hated this feeling, this helplessness. It was foreign to him. In business, he made decisions, controlled outcomes, drove results. But with Lilian, he could only wait and pray she chose him. On the 5th day, Lilian stepped back into the office building, not because she had made her decision, but because she needed to. The moment she walked in, heads turned, conversations paused. No one expected her to return, but she didn't care what anyone thought. She went straight to the executive floor. Lucas was in his office, alone. The room was dim, blinds drawn. When she knocked, he looked up like he wasn't sure if he was dreaming. Lilian walked in, shut the door behind her, and faced him. "I didn't come to talk about the weather," she said softly. He rose from his seat. Tense. "I didn't expect you to come at all. I needed space, to think, to remember who I am." "And?" he asked. "I'm Lilian Dukudu," she said. "I'm not defined by gossip or by who I date. I've worked hard for everything I have. I won't let anyone reduce me again." Lucas swallowed, unsure of where this was going. "And you," she continued, "you hurt me, and you still scare me." He stepped closer, cautiously. But, her voice broke slightly. "I still love you." I never stopped. Silence. Tense. Explosive. Sacred. Lucas's eyes shone with something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Hope. He took her hand slowly, like touching something fragile. "Lilian, I can't undo the past, but I will never let you question your worth again. I will fight for you, every day, publicly, privately, until you believe that I was made to love you." Her throat tightened. "I don't want to hide," she whispered. "I don't want to be the woman people whisper about in hallways." "Then let's not hide," he said. "Let them whisper. We'll walk right past them, together." A tear slipped down her cheek. He reached to wipe it gently. "You sure?" she asked. Lucas smiled. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." The following Monday, the office buzzed again, but for a new reason. Lucas and Lilian walked in side by side. Not in shame, not in fear, but with quiet dignity. They didn't make announcements. They didn't hold hands. They didn't need to. By lunchtime, everyone knew. And for the first time in years, Lilian didn't care what they said. She had made her decision. She had chosen herself. And in doing so, she had chosen love too. By the end of the week, whispers turned into headlines. CEO Lucas Henderson dating longtime executive assistant Lilian Dukudu. Power couple or office scandal. Lagos elite react to Henderson Company romance. The press didn't waste time. A blurry photo of Lucas holding the door open for Lilian at a private brunch in Ikoyi made it to the gossip blogs by Saturday morning. Speculations spun wild. About favoritism, about power imbalance, about legacy, control, and everything in between. Lilian stared at the article from her bed, phone clenched tightly in her hand. She wasn't surprised, but it still hurt. No one seemed interested in the years she'd worked behind the scenes, the overtime, the late nights, the sacrifices. They didn't see her grit. They only saw a headline. The door to her apartment opened gently. Lucas entered, holding a brown paper bag and a look of concern. "I brought you a mala from that spot you love, the one in Surulere." She tried to smile. "You remembered." He walked over, placed the food on her kitchen counter, and leaned on the frame of her doorway. "I saw the blogs," he said. "I figured. They don't matter." She gave a half laugh. "They do, Lucas. Maybe not to you, but I've spent my whole career trying not to be dismissed as just someone's girlfriend, and now that's all I am to the world." Lucas crossed the room slowly, kneeling in front of her. "Then let's change the narrative." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a velvet box. Lilian's heart stopped. "Lucas, don't panic," he said gently. "I'm not proposing marriage. Not yet. I'm proposing clarity. For you, for the company, for everyone watching." He opened the box. Inside was a diamond pendant, small, elegant, carved with her initials. "LD, I want the world to know this is real. And I want you to wear this to the gala on Friday, not as a secret, not as a question mark, but as the woman I respect, trust, and admire." She stared at the necklace, then at him. "Do you know how big that gala is?" she whispered. "Politicians, CEOs, investors." "I know," he said, "and I want you by my side." Lilian swallowed hard. This wasn't a man hiding behind corporate image. This was a man finally standing up for love. She touched the pendant, breath-catching. "Okay," she said. "I'll go." The Lagos business leaders. Gala was held at the iconic Echo Atlantic Grand Ballroom, where every chandelier shimmered like a constellation and the guest list read like a Forbes article. When Lucas walked in that night, dressed in a sharp black tuxedo, all eyes were already on him. But when Lilian Dukudu stepped beside him, hair swept into a braided crown, wearing a royal blue evening gown that clung in all the right places, the room fell silent. Whispers followed. "Is that her? She looks like a queen. She doesn't belong here." "She belongs more than half of us," someone else said firmly. Lucas placed a hand gently at the small of her back. No one missed it. Throughout the night, they moved together, seamlessly. During dinner, Lilian held her own in a discussion on inter-African trade policies with a South African delegation. At the auction, she bid on a painting that would later be donated to an orphanage she once volunteered at. She wasn't just the CEO's girlfriend, she was Lilian Dukudu, and the world began to notice. Near the end of the night, Mrs. Fadike Yoma, a board director who'd once been skeptical of Lilian, approached her by the champagne bar. "I misjudged you," she said simply. Lilian turned. "Ma'am, you're not riding on his power. You're matching it." Lilian smiled softly. "Thank you. That means more than you know." She walked back to Lucas with her chin higher than ever. He looked at her. "How do you feel?" "Like I've finally arrived where I belong." "Next to me?" She nodded. "And standing firmly on my own." As they drove home that night, Lucas reached over and gently took her hand. "I know you were hesitant, and I know this won't be easy, but I want to do this with you, for real." She turned to him, eyes gleaming. "Then let's build something bigger than both of us, something no one can break." He smiled. "Deal." Outside, Lagos glittered. Inside the car, the beginnings of a legacy were quietly unfolding. Not one built on scandal, but one rooted in love, growth, and two people choosing each other again and again. The following Monday at Henderson Company, everything felt different. Not because of gossip or tension or politics, but because Lilian Dukudu walked into the building no longer hiding. Her head was held higher, her steps were lighter, her heart steadier. The gala had shifted something in the way people looked at her. The woman they once whispered about was now being respected, admired, even cautiously envied. Still, not everyone was pleased. By midday, Rachel Atunde returned. She arrived unannounced, walking past the reception desk in a cobalt blue suit and pointed stilettos. Her chin was up, her smile as polished and poisonous as ever. She walked directly to Lucas's office and knocked once before stepping in. Lucas looked up from his laptop. His expression instantly tightened. "Rachel." "Lucas," she said with a sugary tone. "I saw the photos. You and Lilian. Very public. If you're here to start drama, I'm not." She waved a hand dismissively and sauntered in, sitting without being asked. "I'm here as a friend." "We're not friends," he replied coldly. Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Come on, don't be so harsh. I just thought you'd want to know what people are saying." Lucas leaned forward. "I stopped caring about what people say the moment I chose Lilian." Rachel laughed, a little too loud. "Oh, Lucas, you really think this will last?" His jaw clenched. "What's that supposed to mean?" Rachel leaned in, her voice low. "She still carries that scar, Lucas. You gave it to her. You think she'll ever fully trust you again? That she won't wake up one day and realize you're still the same man who walked away the first time?" Lucas stood slowly, towering over her. "Get out, Rachel." She rose, smiling faintly. "Careful, Lucas. Love built on old wounds rarely lasts. You'll see." She turned and walked out. Lilian, just returning from a meeting with the operations team, saw Rachel exiting the office. Their eyes met. Rachel's lips curled into a smirk. History has a funny way of repeating itself, doesn't it? Lilian didn't flinch. Only for people who refuse to grow. Rachel blinked, caught off guard. Then she strutted away. Lilian walked into the office to find Lucas pacing. "She just showed up," he said before she could speak. "She said things that—" "She doesn't matter," Lilian interrupted, her voice calm. "I'm not interested in her words." Lucas stared at her. "You're not shaken?" "I used to be," she admitted, "but not anymore. I know who I am now, and I know what we're building." Lucas exhaled, visibly relieved. "I won't let anyone ruin that," she added. And then she stepped into his arms, not as the assistant, not as the girl from the past, but as the woman who had made a choice. To stand beside him, to move forward, together. 2 weeks later, Lucas called a staff-wide meeting. The entire 25th floor gathered in the boardroom, curious. Rumors had been swirling again, this time about a major restructuring at the executive level. When everyone was seated, Lucas stepped to the front, Lilian beside him, calm and poised in a slate gray dress. "I've spent the last year studying not just this company's numbers, but its people," Lucas began. "And I've realized that leadership is not just about experience or wealth. It's about courage, vision, integrity." He turned slightly toward Lilian. "And there's one person here who embodies all of those." Murmurs spread across the room. Effective immediately, Lucas continued, "Miss Lilian Dukudu will assume the role of Vice President of Strategy Development at Henderson Company." Silence. Then applause. Some hesitant, some stunned, but many proud. Lilian stepped forward, holding the mic briefly. "Thank you," she said. "I know this doesn't look traditional, but neither does excellence. I promise to serve this company with everything I've got, not because of who I'm dating, but because of what I believe we can become." The applause grew louder. Lucas looked at her like he was watching his entire world rise before his eyes. And in many ways, he was. That evening, they sat on the rooftop terrace of Lucas's penthouse, watching the lights of Victoria Island shimmer against the Atlantic. Lilian leaned into his shoulder. "You know they'll keep coming, right? The questions, the doubts, the Rachels." Lucas kissed the top of her head. "Let them come. They'll find two people too busy building to care." She smiled, turning her face up to his. "I love you." He cupped her cheek gently. "I loved you first, and I'll love you last. And as the Lagos night wrapped around them, one thing became certain. This wasn't a second chance. This was the real beginning. 1 year later, the skyline of Victoria Island shimmered under the golden Lagos sun. The glass towers of Henderson Company glinted like polished diamonds. From the top floor, life looked very different for Lilian Dukudu. She stood by the expansive window of her new office. Her vice president of strategy development behind her, framed certificates, regional awards, and press clippings, told the story of a woman who had risen not because of association, but because of audacity. "Your 10 o'clock is here," her assistant announced softly. Lilian smiled. "Let him in." A moment later, Lucas Henderson walked in, dressed in a tailored navy blue suit, holding a single tulip, the same flower he'd brought her every month since the gala. No roses, no over-the-top gestures. Just consistency. That was how he loved her now. Quietly, respectfully, every day. He placed the flower on her desk. "Still as intimidating in this office as you were in mine." She raised a brow playfully. "You mean the office I basically ran while you were figuring out how to be CEO?" He chuckled. "Exactly." They sat across from each other, the way they often did between meetings, not always saying much. They didn't need to. There was a calm between them now, a trust that had been rebuilt slowly, brick by brick. "I spoke to your dad this morning," Lucas said. "He said he's proud of you. Said you remind him of your mom." Lillian's eyes softened. "She would have liked you, once you earned it." "I hope I have," he said quietly. She leaned over and kissed his cheek. Every day. They'd kept their relationship private after the promotion. No more headlines, no interviews. Just life, love, loyalty. That evening, they hosted a small dinner at the Ivy Gardens, surrounded by a few close friends, board members, and family. Lilian sat between Lucas and her father, Mr. Jose Dukudu, laughing as someone teased her about her once scary precision with corporate budgets. "I still say she runs tighter numbers than CBN," someone joked. Lucas raised a glass. "That's why I don't argue with her in the boardroom or the kitchen." Everyone laughed. Later, as the sun set and soft music played, Lucas stood to speak. "This time last year, I nearly lost the best person I've ever known. I thought I could keep business and heart apart. I learned quickly that the heart makes the best decisions." He turned to Lilian. "Thank you for believing in me, for showing me what love looks like when it grows through hard things." Lilian blinked away tears. Then, before the evening ended, he surprised her again. No velvet box, no dramatic speech. Just a question, whispered in her ear as the city lights came on. "Will you build forever with me?" Lilian didn't need time. She didn't need a pause. She whispered back, "Yes." Because this time she wasn't stepping into love blindly. She was walking in with eyes open, heart healed, and a future she had helped shape. And when the world looked at them now, they didn't see scandal. They saw a story of choosing love over pride, over fear, over everything. A story of two people who once fell apart, but chose every single day to fall back together.